Shabbat Shalom, everyone. This crisp morning, but it's still beautiful outside. Nice sun shining. And it's beautiful in here because we're all together and we're getting ready to study the Word of God. Marnie, could you open us up in prayer, please?
Father, I give you thanks for this Shabbat. Thank you for this glory day that you've set aside for us. Thank you for giving us awareness and knowledge to be able to enter into this day. Father, I thank you for the words that you're going to pour through we're going to speak into our hearts and into our lives. And I thank you that we're going to leave this place changed, that we look more like you and shine your light into the dark world. Father, I give you thanks for this building that keeps us warm from the crisp air that is
Yes, Lord.
outside. For all the many blessings that do come from your generous hand. There is none like you. We give you thanks.
Hallelujah.
We give you praise, for this is your day. For you alone are worthy of it all.
Amen. Amen. And what a beautiful prayer. Thank you. Do I seem loud? Am I okay? Seem loud in my own ears. Okay, anyhow. So today we're going to look at our Torah portion of Chaye Sarah. We're going to look specifically at chapter 24 of Genesis. And I like to just walk through these Torah portions with you. And sometimes there's not, and I don't mean to diminish it, there's sometimes no real big point to it, but it helps us to discuss, helps us to think, helps us to look at things a little differently, and just get different viewpoints and understandings from you guys, and different viewpoints and even that I may have, and that you bring out to me. And that's what's so great about this discussion time and the Torah study that we have here. So, chapter 24, we're just going to start with verse 1. It says, "By now Abraham was old, advanced in years." And we're going to stop right there. In the Complete Jewish Bible, which we just read, advanced in years. In the Chumash, it says well on in years. Pretty much the same thing. The only thing that's different is in the Hebrew, it actually uses the word yamim. Yamim. Yamim is days. Yom is day. Yamim is plural, days. So I just wanted to ask you guys, why do you think the Hebrew word for days is translated as years in both of our versions, in the Complete Jewish Bible and in the Chumash that we use? Any thoughts on that? Bill. James, if you could bring the mic, please. No, I would argue that fact.
But it may be the way they looked at it. They figured days, and he being old, they just felt that years was a better translation than just saying he was along in days.
Okay. I mean, I guess I can see your point. Okay. Any other thoughts? Marnie, you kind of wanted to say something, but...
We talked about that this week in Torah Club, and I think it's where it says about, is it the length of days of a man will be 70, 80 years. So in that terminology too, it does say the length of days, and then it gives the years.
Okay, that's a good point. Okay. What if the years of Abraham's life seemed like days? Especially as we get older. I don't know about you guys. When we were kids, a summer was like a year long. Now it's gone in the blink of an eye. But, just a thought. Just a thought. Anyhow, just wanted to bring that out. If we continue on in verse 1. So it says, "And Adonai had blessed Abraham in everything." What does this mean? How could Adonai had blessed Avraham, in everything. What does that mean in your understanding? If Adonai had blessed you in everything, what would you say that means?
For me, a blessing in everything would be my family,
Family. Okay.
finances,
And finances,
and people around me.
people around you. Okay. Pass it back to Sean there.
I would see it as Abraham was obedient in everything, in every aspect of his life. So with obedience comes blessings.
Okay. So if Adonai blessed Avraham in everything, we're saying that Avraham was obedient in everything that he knew at the time, and so Adonai blessed him. Okay. But how did he bless him?
I mean, his descendants, the land that he was supposed to inherit.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of.
Okay.
He never lacked in
He never
anything. He didn't starve. He had clothing to cover himself. He had, for the things that he needed, God took care of it, and everything was provided that way, whether it be through bartering, working for it, or however, but he was blessed. So he didn't suffer.
Bring it up a little closer.
He didn't suffer.
Okay. I would agree with that at some points, especially looking at our family and our lives. And probably most of you here, you've probably never really lacked. Okay. You might have had rough times, but never really lacked. Yafa?
God gave him a son.
Okay. Why do you say that? Do you know something I don't? Or?
You said, how did God bless Abraham? Well, in his old age, he gave him a son.
Ah, okay. It's a good point. Very good point. Dan?
I would include health.
Health.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we never really hear of Abraham being sick, do we?
We don't. We know that he lived to the ripe old age,
Right.
and
175, I believe. Yeah.
yeah, and we know that through that, even in his older age, they did give, they were given their first child, and just throughout
Yeah.
their life, like you said, you don't hear of any ill health, but at the same time, the things they did throughout their life was
Right. Yeah, definitely he had to be in health. Not only was it a miracle, but even in the general sense, he had to be in health at 100 years old to give, to have the ability to bring forth a child. We're in the back there.
Hi, my name is Antonio. I'm the son of Monique. That's my mother.
Well, hello.
Hello, thank you. I'll make it briefly. When I think of the word in, I think of something that is in something like a container, excuse me. So when he says God blessed him in, I would think everything that he had, everything that had to do with his capacity. So I think it has to do with financial. I think it has to do with offspring. It has to do with health. I think it had to do with the whole entire being because it deals with the word in. So then we have to look at what is the in. And so
Okay.
it's something that is like a container, everything that contained. So bless, what I would think would be expansion.
Okay, awesome. That was an awesome idea there. Yes, I like that. Thank you. Yeah, Barry.
I'm looking at it as an opinion or a point of view, maybe. When I think of just myself, and I think pretty much everybody else in this room, if you really step back and look at it, we've all been blessed. I mean, yeah, we've had problems, but the blessings that we receive far outnumber anything bad that we've experienced. I mean, we're still here,
Yeah.
and we've persevered. And as somebody said in this book, we're still running the race.
Yes,
So.
very true. James?
I was reading in the book of Jasher. It's an extra biblical book. It's mentioned in the Bible 3 different times
Yes.
in the Old Testament, and it even though it's not considered the same as a canonical book in the Bible, it actually blew me away, just giving a lot of history of Abraham from birth till he left his father in Haran.
Yeah.
And how he was very rich when he left, where the 300 men who were with him that he went and fought a 5-giant army and defeated them, where they came from, and all that he had, and the life that he lived before that. It was an incredible, incredible story.
Yeah. There is, you're right. There's a lot of agadic, what they call agadic stories that are in that book. Bill?
I also like the fact that last week God, Elohim, said that Abraham was his best friend.
Mm.
And that's kind of unique to have Elohim as your best friend. And
Yeah.
also he made a covenant with him. So he sealed that everything in the covenant that continued to this day.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. To be called, for God himself to say that you're his friend, that's pretty deep. Yeah. So I want to give my explanation of it and the sage's explanation of it. And Yafa kind of hinted to it. So when it says that Adonai had blessed Abraham in everything or with everything, it can be translated both ways from the Hebrew. The Hebrew word used there is bakol. Kol is all or everything. Ba meaning in or with, in this case. And the gematria, most of you are familiar with that, the numerical value of Hebrew words. It's pretty interesting to me, and I like to share these things with you. The gematria of bakol is 52. Okay, that's the numerical value of that word, 52. But also the Hebrew word for son, ben, is 52. Okay, and so this is what the sages say. Yes, in his old age, Abraham was given a son by Sarah, right? This is what Abraham wanted, probably more than anything, right? An heir to his, to his kingdom here on earth, his, everything that he owned and had developed. And so, yes, when it says in everything, it is referring to Abraham's son by Sarah. Okay. You all had very good takes on that, and I appreciated that. I'm just telling you what the ancient sages say about that. So yes, in everything, because he wanted it so bad, his son was considered. That's what Abraham meant when he said that. Any thoughts on that? Just agreeance or Barry?
I think culturally, yeah, that because in those days, to have a son meant to carry on the family, the family name, what the father had established, what he had built,
Right.
that was passed on and carried on, and it also translated into the belief of the afterlife that was, how Abraham would go on living.
Okay, yeah. Mhm.
I hope I translated
I
that
understand
well.
what you're saying, yeah.
But yeah, that, again, culturally, that was a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely.
Yeah.
We have Yafa in the back, Steve.
So I was thinking in order for Sarah to have a son, it showed the power of Adonai. And then just in reference to other scripture, right, that would confound the wise.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So everything that the world would think, he can dispel that in his
Sure.
own power and character.
Sure. Did Abraham have a son already? Yes, right? By a much younger woman, right? And so to have this uniquely begotten son, right, by Sarah, was a big deal. Back to Yalta.
And I think really what's more important is the age of which Abraham and Sarah were. Because like you said, he was able to do that in his young age, but not through Sarah. And so, you know, Adonai waited so long, and then everybody thought, oh, it's not going to happen. And then it was like, well, I said it will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amen. Okay. Let's move on to verse 2. Genesis 24, verse 2. Abraham said to the servant who had served him the longest, who was in charge of all he owned, put your hand under my thigh. So, the servant who had served him the longest. Who was this? Eliezer. What? How do you know this? Does it tell us Eliezer there? No. But it is inferred from somewhere else, actually, yes. Turn to chapter 15, verse 2. Genesis 15, verse 2. It says, Avram replied, Adonai, God, what good will your gifts be to me if I continue childless, and Eliezer from Damascus inherits my possessions? Okay, so it's kind of inferred from there. But there is another clue that it's also referring to Eliezer. Let's read, it's probably right there on the same page, chapter 14, verse 14. When Avram heard that his nephew had been taken captive, he led out his trained men who had been born in his house, 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. So, I'm going to point out something more from Gematria. Okay, again, the numerical value of Hebrew words. And it says there 318. Okay. Well, it just so happens that the Gematria of Eliezer is 318. And so, the sages discussed this, that possibly there wasn't 318 men. There was just Abraham and Eliezer. And so, what's that? I don't think he did, no. But just something neat to point out there. James.
Interesting thing about Eliezer, he was one of two of the head of King Nimrod's chief caretakers. And when Abraham left, Eliezer and I think it was O-N-A, were part of his entourage that left.
Yeah.
So that's where he came from.
Yes. Eliezer
very
does have an interesting genealogy where he came from, yes. And I can't remember. I might talk about that later. I'm not sure. I forget. So just something to point out there. So anyhow, we're talking about Abraham's head servant. So if this was Eliezer, that's referred to in chapter 14, verse 14, and also chapter 15, verse 2, obviously Eliezer's been around a while, right? He's been with Abraham quite some time. And so this is his head servant that we're speaking of in chapter 24. Let me turn back there. And I'm not going to touch on the under the thigh at this point. I speak about it later in the message, so stick around for that. Let's go to verse 12. Chapter 24, verse 12. And this is Eliezer. He's going up to Haran, okay? And he gets to a certain point by a well. And he says this prayer. In verse 12, he said, Adonai, God of my master Abraham, please let me succeed today and show your grace to my master Abraham. Verse 13, here I am, standing by the spring as the daughters of the townsfolk come out to draw water. Verse 14, I will say to one of the girls, please lower your jug so that I can drink. If she answers, yes, drink, and I will water your camels as well, then let her be the one you intend for your servant Yitzchak. This is how I will know that you have shown grace to my master. Okay. So this is the servant's prayer. It doesn't specifically say this is Eliezer, but we're inferring that it is. Verse 14, he says after he prays verse 12 and 13 basically, and part of 14, at the end of 14 he says, this is how I will know that you have shown grace to my master. Okay? Verses 15 through 20. We'll read it quick. We have time. It says, verse 15. Before he had finished speaking, Rivka, the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nachor, Abraham's brother, came out with her jug on her shoulder. 16. The girl was very beautiful, a virgin, never having had sexual relations with any man. She went down to the spring, filled her jug, and came up. Verse 17. The servant ran to meet her and said, please give me a sip of water from your jug to drink. 18. Drink, my lord, she replied, and immediately lowered her jug onto her arm and let him drink. Verse 19. When she was through letting him drink, she said, I will also draw water for your camels until they have drunk their fill. Verse 20. She quickly emptied her jug into the trough, then ran again to the well to draw water, and kept on drawing water for all his camels. Verse 21. The man gazed at her in silence, waiting to find out whether Adonai had made his trip successful or not. And that was verse 21. So, verse 21 to me, in a little bit, confused me. Because we read back through 12, 14, he prays these things. Verse 14, he says, this is how I will know. Verses 15 through 20, the servant's prayer is fulfilled. Would you not say that? So why in verse 21 does he say, I'm waiting to find out whether Adonai has made his trip successful or not at this point? Why would he say that? We have 2, 3 on this side of the room. Go ahead, Sean.
I would say it's basic human nature.
Okay.
We do the same thing. You know, just make sure this is absolutely for sure. You know, just give me one more sign, just one more.
Are we ever satisfied?
No.
Yes, you're probably right. Elisheva.
It confirms free will for me, that even though God has a plan in place and we're to do his bidding, sometimes we say, oh no, I'm not going to do it. And so even though this appeared to be the person, she could have said, by the way, I have a husband, or by the way, because he didn't know at this point.
Okay.
Was she married? Was she not? Was she betrothed? Or could it just be that she would be just a jerk face or something later on? Whatever. But she had the free will to do what she wanted to do. So it could be he waited to see, is she truly, is there anything else about her that I need to observe? Maybe?
Okay. Obviously, she wasn't a jerk face. She said, as soon as he asked, yes, drink. And then she volunteered. He didn't say, hey, could you water my camels too? No, she voluntarily said, I'll water your camels also, right? I don't know, that to me is like, okay.
Well, I've had confirmation of things that I've done in my past, and I thought, yes, that's confirmation. God wanted me to do something. And in the flesh, at least, afterwards, it looks like I was so totally wrong. But yet, in my heart, in my mind, I received the confirmation from God.
Okay.
Also, I've been under a different rabbi's teaching who said that Eliezer really wanted the inheritance for himself from Abraham, and that perhaps he was just like, man, I don't want to give up this inheritance. I guess I
Yeah.
better make sure.
Yeah, I speak about that a little bit later in the message, yes, what you're mentioning. Yafa?
So the only thing I was thinking, even though it doesn't say it, is in order for the mission, if you will, to be complete, she had to go with him. And he
okay.
didn't know that part.
Yeah, that's true. That would be the one variable so far, I think. Everything had been fulfilled, but whether or not would she go? James?
I'm just curious, what's the gematria on jerk face?
I'll have to look that one up.
No, I think it's interesting as he sits there and he watches her in silence and he asks us to see if his trip is successful or not. I just searched it because I was curious to see. One camel can drink up to 20 gallons of water. And so I think to watch and to sit her and to watch and to see how her chesed is, like, is she really like truly loving kindness, serving, or is it going to become burdensome and wearisome of like, I'm still watering these stinking camels, like what did I get myself into? And
okay.
Just to see that character.
So, and I'll discuss this later on, I think, in the message, but so really, what you're saying is he wanted to see, she said the words, he wanted to see if she was going to fulfill them, right? Barry?
It does say in there, she quickly emptied her jug into the trough, then again ran to the well to draw water, and kept drawing water for all the camels. So it was still, she was still working.
Yeah.
And then if you go to 22, it said when the camels were done drinking, then he took action.
So, yeah, so she did fulfill her words, no doubt. Right?
Yes,
she was
completely.
fulfilling them even while he was contemplating whether this was a successful mission or not, right? Nagid, you had something?
Yeah, all I wanted to say was that the sages say that Abraham was the pillar of kindness. And with Eliezer being raised in his house, technically, at the end, he was under Abraham,
Yes.
then he would have that kindness. And I think that's what he was looking for in that girl, because it would be the same kindness that Abraham would have, the same hospitality. That's why the prayer was she would lower her jug, and because he was looking for that kindness that Abraham had.
Very good. Unfortunately, now you guys are not getting a message today because Nagid said it. So, okay. Hey, that's all right. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, in our club, we were talking Thursday night. Basically, that's what the sages said, that she showed a character of kindness
Yes. Yes.
towards
I mean,
animals and so forth. So,
in a way, she was of the same DNA, right? She was from the same family. Yafa?
Aaron, do you know by chance if the kindness she showed was chesed?
I do not.
Okay, never mind. I'll look it up.
Because I don't know if it ever really says that she showed kindness. There's something we will hint on to that a little later on. Yes, she did show kindness by her actions. I hear you talking back there. But I don't know if it ever really necessarily says that she showed kindness, so that we could look it up and see if that's chesed. There was something I was going to hit on that one of you said, but now I forget. Anyhow. So we pretty much concluded that he still wanted to see whether she was going to be the one by agreeing to come with Eliezer back to Isaac, right? That's why he was sitting and waiting. Let's go to verse 36. We're going to jump ahead a little bit here. Verse 36 says, so just to sum up, okay, so he asks her some more questions, gives her some gifts, and then, yes, Rivka takes Eliezer back to his house. Okay? And then this is where Eliezer is kind of repeating his story. And in verse 36, he says, Sarah, my master's wife, bore my master a son when she was old, and he has given him everything he has. What is this a picture of? It's pretty simple, but I wanted to ask you anyhow. Adonai and Yeshua, right? Yeah, yeah. The uniquely begotten Son inherits everything.
I think, just taking that as face value, we might interpret that, as giving him everything he has as a physical kind of inheritance.
Yeah.
Get all his livestock, all of his silver, whatever.
Right.
But I think it's a lot deeper than that,
Yeah.
because I'm not going to steal your thunder here.
No, go ahead.
Okay. He has passed on the covenant that was made with him and all of the blessings that flow through that.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Because when Abraham's walking the land, does Adonai, and I'm asking this as a question, does Adonai ever tell Abraham directly, this land is yours? Or does he say, this will be your descendants' land, right? So there's a little difference there, yeah, if you think about what you're saying. Go ahead, Yafa.
So I was thinking, really building off of Barry, if Abraham was considered righteous, then he had to be obedient to the Torah. So he would have passed on his knowledge of the Torah and what he needed to follow to Yitzhak.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. So that was definitely part of the inheritance, or that he has given him everything, right? Yeah, not just like Barry was saying, the physical, but some spiritual understanding, and also. Elisheva?
So, Yitzhak was the foreshadow of Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
When he was to be sacrificed, he wasn't like 3-4 years old not knowing what was going on.
Right.
He knew his father was taking him, and I'm assuming he knew the purpose of the trip that they went.
Well, he had a suspicion, maybe. I don't know if he
It doesn't
knew,
say, but I mean, it's like everything is pretty weird.
Yeah.
If the servant, the servants are staying behind. Abraham's taking,
yeah.
And then you don't hear that Yitzhak said, "Excuse me, what do you want to do to me?" He had to be, in a way, prepared to be sacrificed. So he had to know before the issue, and we see him as a lamb going to slaughter. Well, no, because if a lamb knew he was going to slaughter, then But we see him as accepting this is the will of the Father.
Yeah.
And so what I'm seeing is that I guess what I'm seeing is that I wanted to make a point for no reason. Never mind.
Okay. Go ahead, Yafa.
I was going to say, really, it's a picture of us. If Abraham represents our father, and then we are the children, we are to be able to give ourselves unto sacrifice, right? Even unto death. Right? That's a picture of our job before Messiah.
True. Sean?
In all honesty, wasn't Yitzhak and Yeshua around the same age at the time that they were supposed to be
Very
sacrificed?
close. I mean, I don't think it's more of a, I don't want to say mythology, but it's not stated clearly, but yeah, he was definitely older. Isaac was. How he's telling these people this. Eliezer is telling these people, Rivka's family, this. what would have been his proof of this? That Abraham was blessed, and Abraham gave Isaac everything. Okay. No, go ahead, Nagit.
Okay. If I remember right, he left with 10 camels.
Mm-hmm.
So he couldn't take everything on those 10 camels.
Right.
So I would say that he had to give him some kind of a letter, some kind of proof that.
That's it. Folding up my book. You did steal the thunder. Yes, go. Very good, Nagid. I love it, though, honestly. I love your thinking. That's great. But yes, that's what the sages do say this. Yes, that obviously Eliezer would have had to have some kind of document, even back then, showing this is what he did, this is what Abraham probably signed it and said, yes, this is all going to my son Yitzhak, right? Like a will almost, okay? And so, yes, Nagid, you are 100% right. And, yeah. And they get this understanding of this document from verse 10. Let's look at verse 10. Let me see. I wrote this down. I didn't really write an explanation, so let's see. Let me see here. Okay, this is okay. Let me grab the Chumash because we have to read from there. So, verse 10 in the Complete Jewish Bible of chapter 24. It says, Then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and all kinds of gifts from his master, got up and went to Aram Nacharim, to Nachor's city. Okay. Let's see. Hopefully it says it in here, what I'm looking for. If not, I'll have to grab something else. Let me get to the right chapter. And so in the Chumash, it actually says, I might have actually wrote it down. Yeah, I wrote it down. It says, he went, Eliezer went, and with all the goodness of the master in his hand. That's what the Hebrew literally says, okay? It says, Eliezer, it does say he took 10 camels, but it says, when he says all kinds of gifts from his master, it says he took took with him all the goodness of the master in his hand. Okay? And so, this is where the sages are relating this to, because literally, obviously, he couldn't take everything in his hand, right? And so, as like Nagid was saying, obviously he must have had a document of some kind showing this, okay? That he took everything, because that's what the Hebrew says. He took it in his hand, okay? Just some insight there of how Eliezer would have proven this to Rivka's family. We hit on Isaac being like Yeshua. Let's go to verse 47. Chapter 24, Genesis 24, verse 47. Verse 47, this is Eliezer speaking still. He says, I asked her, whose daughter are you? And she answered, the daughter of Bethuel, son of Nachor, whom Milcah bore to him. Then I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrists. Is this what happened? Is this what really happened? If you know the story, I'm asking you, is this what really happened? You have to go back a little bit to when Eliezer first comes upon Rivka, okay? Verses like 22, 23, 24, maybe if you look that over. Yeah, of chapter 24, verses 22. And so I ask you again. He says in verse 47, I asked her, whose daughter are you? And she answered who she was. And then he says, then I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrist. What's different here? You're not getting it, huh? Okay, Bill, got a thought? Need a mic, please.
Timing.
Timing. Okay.
Yeah, somehow they're bringing it back full circle. He sees her and he gives her all that in verse 22, and then we go through the thing with the family, and somehow the way it's written is that they're bringing back further evidence of who she really is and the family connection, something. But
okay, I see.
It isn't happening at this point. It happened earlier. Like
Right.
First.
So
but
you're
the way the writing, the phrasing, there's some further meaning, and I'm not following.
Well, it's much more simpler. Maybe Yafa's got it. I'm not. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say he does the same thing after she's watered the camels. He finds out who she is, and he has these possessions. And so I'm thinking the second time it said he's already asked, can he spend the night? He's already in the company of the family. Evidently, I'm thinking she's accepted the position, and now she's betrothed to Yitzhak, and she wears the jewelry that would prove that.
All true, but not the point I'm getting to. Barry?
In verse 22, it doesn't necessarily say that he gave it to her at that point. He took it. He was holding it. He was dedicating that to her, or consecrating that to her as a promise, and then later officially was given to her.
Yeah, so he did give it to her. It may not
Okay.
specifically say
Okay,
that.
I see what
Yes,
Elisheva
as
says
Elisheva
there.
pointed out, when you get down to 29 and 30, she obviously had those on her, because when she ran ahead, her brother saw them. Okay. So, to make this more simpler, the question I was asking, in verse 47, Eliezer reversed the order of it. Okay, from verse 22. In 22, as soon as the camels were done, he takes out the gold nose ring, the bracelets, and gives them to her. Right? Verse 23, and then he asks, whose daughter are you? After he'd already given her the gifts. But in verse 47, he says, I asked her these things, then I put the ring on her nose, and then gave her the bracelets on her wrists. So verse 47, not only is it reversed, but it does clarify what Elisheva was saying also from the other verses, that it does say he himself there says, I put the ring on her nose and I put the bracelets on her wrists. But in this case, he says he tells the family that he did this after he found out who she was. But in 22 and 23, it's really the reverse order. He gave the gifts and then he asks her. So my question to you, after all that, why? Why is it reversed? Why did he reverse it when he told the story? Ashira?
Is it quite possible that he gave her the gifts because, first, without asking, because they were just gifts without any ties? Where if he would have asked her first and then gave her the gifts, then now these gifts have ties? So regardless of whichever way she answers, like given the gifts, there's no ties to them, then she has free will to ask, where the gifts given with the ties, and then if she says no, then she has to give them back. So maybe it was a witness to her?
So if we took that a step further, we could say that he gave her these gifts possibly as payment for watering all his camels. No, I'm just saying that. But go ahead, Yafa.
So what I'm thinking is he gives them to her because it's followed the path that he asked Adonai, that she would lower her jug, give him a drink, water the camels. And so he's trusting she is the woman that God provided based upon what he asks for. And then later on he asks who she is, but he's already blessed Adonai and thanked him for providing her, if you will.
Okay. Yes. I would agree with that he was trusting she was the one, but he still wanted to ask to verify who she was, because he knew he had to go to Abraham's family, right? So, James.
I'm just curious. I don't know much about ancient jewelry, but when you put a nose ring on yourself, I can see that, but when you're doing it to someone else, you're almost like picking their nose. It just seems something very odd that someone would do. I don't understand if there's something into that or not.
Yeah, I haven't really looked into that, but it's interesting what you're saying. Yeah, I would imagine her nose wasn't already pierced. Maybe it was. I don't know. And she didn't have her normal nose ring in. I don't know. And it's odd that, just to comment farther, and this is my own opinion, but how odd we think that is today, even to look at someone and a nose ring and sometimes we're like, oh, what's that? Sometimes, I don't know. But it's coming more customary again today. So, go ahead.
So I'm thinking it's more along the lines of when we would put the awl through the ear and then they became the servant. And so I'm wondering if there's a connection that way, that when he put the nose ring in, she then became the servant.
So it would involve a piercing of some kind. Interesting. Okay.
When I think of nose ring, I think of a bull nose ring,
Like
and
a
how
bull.
and how you control that bull. So to have someone come and put a nose ring on me is almost like a controlling thing. I don't think I would like that.
I don't know. I don't know what it consisted of. If it was a little thing, a big thing, I'm not sure. It wasn't very big because it says it only weighed a fifth of an ounce or something. So it wasn't real big.
Just as a side note, nose rings don't have to be pierced. Like my daughter has one and it's not pierced. It's just a thing that snips on. So
Good point. Good point. I don't know if they would have had the. How's it attached?
It's just more like a clamp, like a spring clamp. Or
Okay. Maybe they had that then. I don't know. Okay. Go ahead, Dan.
sorry, I was just going to say I'm still not convinced that it's told in a different order, because I think he could have, just like it says earlier on, he took these things, then he asked her, as it says later, then he put them on her, and that could still all happen before the son or her brother saw them.
Okay. It could have. I see your point. But in, how do I want to say this? In the understanding of how it's written and in the order that it's written, that obviously they're taking it to mean that he gave them to her. That's the best answer I can come up with for that. But it's possible. I understand your point, that it may not necessarily be in reverse order, though all the sages and rabbis would say it is in the reverse order. But yes, they are obviously wrong. Okay. I'm sorry, Antonia?
Yes.
Is that
that's right.
Anthony? I was trying to remember your name.
Antonio.
Antonio, yes.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so I just wanted to make sure, I wanted just to look over again before I gave my my theory. So my theory is maybe he gave it reverse, because maybe when it was time to report back, maybe he wasn't 100% sure if he did the right thing. You know what I mean? Because when he did it, it's kind of like this is it. But now he has to give a report of what's done. Then it's like, I actually did it reverse because I'm not really sure if this was really the right thing. So I'm kind of, it's almost as if if that's acceptable.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's along the lines I was thinking.
And that's really, I have this point down, exactly what you're saying. It was really, maybe he did it not only to show courtesy to Rivka's family, okay, by saying, well, I did ask her first, but then also to diminish his zeal and expectancy a little bit, you know. Like you say, he was so excited at first, he gave them to her, and he's like, oh, well, yeah, maybe I should ask who she is, right?
So if I could just add a little bit to it, like this is how I write my notes, but so if that theory is correct, then it gives a sight that even in our mistakes or what we think, what we've done wrong, when God is in it, he orchestrated, is actually ordained by him.
Okay, yeah, very good. Any more thoughts? Let's move on. We're almost out of time. Verse 48. Let's look at verse 48. So this is Eliezer. He's continuing speaking. He says, after he put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrist, bowed my head, prostrated myself before Adonai, and blessed Adonai, God of my master Abraham, for having led me in the right way to obtain my master's brother's granddaughter for his son. What do you think he meant by for having led me in the right way? The right way. I mean, what's that? Is there any deeper meaning to that? Bill?
Well, when I say that, I'm acknowledging Proverbs. It says, acknowledge God and he will direct your paths in all your ways. I'm saying he's giving acknowledgement that God did direct his path and led him the right way.
Sure, definitely is saying that. It's interesting when you look at the Hebrew. You know, I love to look at the Hebrew. And before I tell you that, Yafa, you'd like to say something?
So just building off of what Bill said, you know, he trusted that when she let him drink and lowered the jugs, it was like, okay, you know, I've heard from God. And in our humanness, we would want to start adding more to that, and he restrained, you know, that he trusted that was it. So I know in my case, I'd want to do 2 or 3 more things just to be sure.
Right. Yeah. In the Hebrew, it says, Hin chani baderech emet. Okay. Oh, I heard it. Was that you, Nagid? No. That was a 3rd star, I think, for you. So really, it's saying not the right way. It's saying in the way of truth. That's interesting. What do you think is the true way, if this is what Eliezer's saying? What's he referring to? Torah? Nagid?
My question is, and I'm going to go back just a hair, is
Okay.
that the 2 bracelets that he put on her arms, were they symbolization of the scroll that Moses brought down, the covenant? Did they symbolize the covenant?
You're going to stand up here with me, okay? Yes. In answer to your question. Yes. Yes, they are actually.
That would be the way of truth.
Okay. Yeah, that's what it's hinting to. You're right. Very good. Very good. Yes. Yes. I feel like a yes man up here now. Yes, yes, yes.
That means you're teaching us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Let's move on. Verse 49. He says, so this is still Eliezer speaking. He says, so now if you people intend to show grace and truth to my master, tell me. But if not, tell me so that I can turn elsewhere. So here, grace and truth, they are translated correctly from the Hebrew. It is chesed and emet. Why would you think Eliezer would say this? Now he said, if we read the Hebrew, he was led in a true path or a true way. And now he's saying, if you intend to show me grace and truth, then please do so, basically. What could he be referring to? Why would he use grace and truth? together there. Yafa?
So I'm thinking if it goes back to the world, stands on three things,
Mm-hmm.
right? The worship of God, loving kindness,
And Torah.
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Could he be referring to Torah and the Gospels, even? To Mashiach, right? As Rabbi Mike always says, it's not one thing or the other. It's not grace here and truth here. There's grace in the Torah and there's Torah in the grace, right? Torah's not written yet. No, it's not written yet. But there's a lot of oral law there. Oh my goodness, we're going to run out of time. Let's jump to verse 62 quick. 62 of Genesis 24 says, Meanwhile, Yitzchak, one evening after coming along the road from Be'er Lachai Roi, he was living in the Negev. We'll stop there. And I just wanted to point out, it's interesting, in the Hebrew, there's no evening in verse 62. I'm not sure why they say that. And there's no road in verse 62 in the Hebrew. But there is evening in verse 63, and so they kind of took these two verses from the Hebrew and they made it so we'd have a better understanding of it, basically, in the English, okay? But really my question is, Yitzchak was coming back. The Hebrew says Yitzchak came from coming from Be'er Lachai Roi. So why did he go there? Why did he even go down there? Why was he down there? Why do you want to go there? Any thoughts, ideas? I'll give you some hints because we're running out of time. Go ahead, Ashira.
Possibly to pray for his wife to be. Because he knew that he was going out to get a wife.
Okay. There's a lot more to that, and unfortunately, we're running out of time. So why would he want to go there to pray? This isn't part of what I had, but I wanted to see. Why would he go there? There is a reason for it.
Was it a field where it was secluded?
No. Okay, I'll give you, this is part of my hints. Number one, we have to look at who just died, who just passed away. Sarah, right? Be'er Lachai Roi is where Hagar was. This is where, when she went to the well and she said, this is the well where God sees, right? Because she was in such distress. Okay?
Can I?
So, Sarah, you want to say something, Ashira? You look excited.
I was going to say, because his wife Sarah had just passed away, and then Hagar was the one who he had to send away, and so maybe he was missing her because he had to send her away because of the jealousy of Sarah. Right. So then he went and said, okay, Sarah's gone, why don't you come back?
This is why Yitzchak went to Be'er Lachai Roi, because, yes, he thought that he could comfort his father after the passing of his wife and Yitzchak's mother, Sarah, by going and retrieving Hagar again. Okay? Okay. And, oh my goodness, we're going to run just a couple minutes late. Verse 63, real quick, says Yitzchak went out walking in the field, and as he looked up, he saw camels approaching. He saw camels. It says he went out walking in the field. This isn't really the word that's used here in the Hebrew. Okay? The word used in the Hebrew, and I want to just point this out, is lasuach. And it means he went out to the field to converse. He went out to the field. Lasuach means to converse, to have a conversation. Okay? So, and we've hit on this, who did he go out there to have a conversation with? But God, right? Hashem, right? And real quick, if you turn to Psalm 102, verse 1. Psalms 102, verse 1, it says, prayer of a sufferer overcome by weakness and pouring out his complaint before Adonai. And really, the word there for complaint is a form of suach also. And it means that this person here in 102 was pouring out he was having a conversation with God, basically, as to why am I going through this? Why am I suffering? So there's what I have for you for our Torah study. Thank you for all your participation. It was awesome. And, you'll see Nagid and I up here later in the message. Ooh, I need to put this back. Thank you. Thank you for... Okay. Everybody can find their seats. I know Torah study ran a little long. Sorry about that. Oh my goodness. Shabbat Shalom. It's good to see you all. It's good to see our sanctuary bustle with life. Amen, yes. And it's good that our Torah study ran long. It's good to study the Word together, right? And as shofar blowers come forth, I think we're going to confirm that in our blowing of the shofar, that we will continue to study. We will not be thwarted. We will not be dismayed. We will not be hindered in our study and in our reading of His Word, even in this day and age that tries to say it may not be what's supposed to be done. Amen. 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 So if you could please continue standing and turn towards the rear of our sanctuary. This is facing east towards Jerusalem. And we're going to have our first cantering of the Shema. For those of you who are new, it is on pages 47 and 48 in your Siddur if you need that. And so we will cantor this together. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kavod Malkuto Leolam Vaheyeh. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Blessed is the name of His glorious kingdom for all eternity. Amen. Yes. And now is our opportunity to express our joy in that, and knowing that He is God and that His kingdom is forever, and that we are pursuing being a part of that kingdom. And so we can show our joy, show our praise, show our worship during this time. Please, there's banners, there's flags, there's tambourines. Do not hesitate to show your joy. Amen.
as we continue to praise our Lord, if you would turn to page 42 and stand. And I know the standing is kind of lengthy. If you feel that you need to sit, please feel free to do so. It's not mandatory. We just ask as the word would go forth that at different times you would stand. We're going to begin on page 42 with the Shokanad Marom. I will cantor this in the Hebrew, and then we'll repeat it together in the English. Shokanad Marom vekadosh shimo vekatatu rananu zarakim Adonai leasharim navatehila v'fi yasharim titalalo uvderez zarakim titbarak uvilshon chasedim titroman uvkerev kedoshim tikadash. Together. He who abides forever, exalted and holy is his name. And it is written, sing joyfully, you righteous, to the Lord. It is befitting for the upright to praise him. By the mouth of the upright you shall be lauded. By the words of the righteous you shall be blessed. By the tongue of the pious you shall be exalted. And in the midst of the holy you shall be sanctified. And then on page 44 for the Barku, and it is responsive. I will cantor this in the Hebrew, and then we'll repeat it responsively in the English. Baku het Adonai hamburak. Bless the Lord, the Blessed One. Amen. And then if you would turn on page 48 for the second singing of the Shema, and it is our tradition to turn to the back of the sanctuary so that we're facing Jerusalem when it's said, and you can follow along on the PowerPoint or in your sittering.
Shema Yisrael Adonai
And if you would turn to page 58. For the Kedusha, the sanctification prayer, I will cantor this first in the Hebrew, and then we'll repeat it together in the English. Your response in the Hebrew will be in the second paragraph, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Nekadesh Chimka Be'elam, Kashem Shomek Tashim, Ohoto, Bishmeh Maharom, Kakatu Vayadni Ve'echa, Ve'karaze Elze, Va'amar. Liumatan Baruch Yomeru, Baruch Kavod Adonai Mihim Komo, Mim Kolcha Melkin Etofia, Vetim Lok Aleinu, Kimecha Hakim, Anachnu La. Matatim Lok Betzion, Bekarot Bayamenu, Leolam Bahi Tishkon. Tihi Kalda, Vetihi Kadash, Betok Yerushalayim Yircha, Ledovado, Netzach, Netzach, Netzakim, Veinenu Tirena, Malchutecha. Kadova Amor Bashirei Uzecha Ayedei David Ayedei David Ayedei David Mashiach Zikeka Imlok Adonai Leolam Elohai Zion Lehedova Hador Hallelujah. We will sanctify your name in this world, even as it is sanctified in the heavens above, as it is written by your prophet, and they call to each other, saying, those facing them say, blessed. From your heavenly abode you will appear, O our King, and reign over us, for we wait for you. When will you reign in Zion, seen even in our days? May you dwell there forever and ever. May you be exalted and sanctified within Jerusalem, your city, from generation to generation and for all eternity. May our eyes see your kingdom as expressed in the songs of your might, by the hand of David, your righteous anointed. The Lord shall reign forever, your God, O Zion, from generation to generation. Hallelujah. And now if you would turn to page 64 as we enter into our Torah service. I will cantor the Ein Kamoka, and then we'll say it together in the English. Ein kamoka ve'Elohim Adonai, ve'ein kamesecha, malchucha malchucho olamin, umin shataka, bechadur vador, Adonai melech, Adonai malak, Adonai yimlok, le'olam vayed, Adonai oz le'amohu yitain, Adonai yivarech, Shalom. There is none like you among the gods, O Lord, and there is nothing like your works. Your kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and your dominion is throughout all generations. The Lord reigns, the Lord has reigned, the Lord will reign forever and ever. The Lord will give strength unto his people, the Lord will bless his people with peace. And then continuing with the Vayehi ben Soharon, when the ark would travel. Vayehi ben Soharon, Vayomer Moshe, Kuma Adonai, Veyafutsu ovecha, Veyanusu misaneka, mihipanecha, Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah, Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah, Udevar Adonai miYerushalayim, Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah. Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah. Lehamo Israel Bihikdushato. When the ark would travel, Moshe would say, "Arise, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered, and let them that hate you flee from you. For from Zion will go forth the Torah, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Blessed be he who in his holiness gave the Torah to his people Israel."
Good morning. Shabbat Shalom. Today's parashah portion is Haye Sarah, Sarah's life. And this can be found in Genesis chapter 4, chapter 24, verses 1 through 61. May I please have the blessings before the reading of the Torah?
If you would please turn back to page 66 in your Siddurim. Baku et Adonai Hamvarak. Baruch Adonai Hamvarak Le'olam Vayeh. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam.
Asher bakar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch atah Adonai, notein haTorah. Amen. Bless the Lord, the Blessed One. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has chosen us from all peoples and given us his Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord, giver of the Torah.
And as is tradition, I'll be reading the first two lines from the holy language of Hebrew. Vayihu, Haye Sarah, Mea, Shana, the Asrim. Sarah Vasheva Shanim Shane Haye Sarah Vatamat Sarah Bakiryat Arba Hev Chevron Ba'eretz Canaan Vayavo Avraham Lispod La Sarah Valiv Kota. By now Avraham was old, advanced in years, and Adonai had blessed Avraham in everything. Avraham said to the servant who had served him the longest, who was in charge of all he owned, "Put your hand under my thigh, because I want you to swear by Adonai, God of heaven and God of the earth, that you will not choose a wife for my son from among the women of the Canaani, among whom I am living, but that you should go to my homeland, to my kinsmen, to choose a wife for my son, Yitzchak." The servant replied, "Suppose the woman isn't willing to follow me to this land. Must I then bring your son back to the land from which you came?" Abraham said to him, "See to it that you don't bring my son back there. Adonai, the God of heaven, who took me away from my father's house and away from the land I was born in, who spoke to me and swore to me, 'I will give this land to your descendants.' He will send his angel ahead of you, and you are to bring a wife for my son from there. But if the woman is unwilling to follow you, then you are released from your obligation under my oath. Just don't bring my son back there." The servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his master, and swore to him concerning the matter. Then the servant took 10 of the master's camels and all kinds of gifts from his master, got up, and went to Aram Naharaim, to Nachor's city. Toward evening, when the women go out to draw water, he had the camels kneel down outside the city by the well. He said, "Adonai, God of my master Abraham, please let me succeed today, and show your grace to my master Abraham. Here I am, standing by the spring as the daughters of the townsfolk come out to draw water. I will say to one of the girls, 'Please lower your jug so that I can drink.' If she answers, 'Yes, drink, and I will water your camels as well,' then let her be the one you intend for your servant Yitzchak. This is how I will know that you have shown grace to my master." Before he had finished speaking, Rivkah, the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nachor, Abraham's brother, came out with her jug on her shoulder. The girl was very beautiful, a virgin, never having had sexual relations with any man. She went down to the spring, filled her jug, and came up. The servant ran to meet her and said, "Please, give me a sip of water from your jug to drink." "Drink, my lord," she replied, and immediately lowered her jug onto her arm and let him drink. When she was through letting him drink, she said, "I will also draw water for your camels until they have drunk their fill." She quickly emptied her jug into the trough, then ran again to the well to draw water. and kept on drawing water for all his camels. The man gazed at her in silence, waiting to find out whether Adonai has made his trip successful or not. When the camels were done drinking, the man took a gold nose ring weighing 1/5 of an ounce and 2 gold bracelets weighing 4 ounces, and asked, "Whose daughter are you? Tell me, please. Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night?" She answered, "I am the daughter of Betuel, the son of Milcah, bore to Nahor," adding, "We have plenty of straw and fodder and room for staying overnight." The man bowed his head and prostrated himself before Adonai. Then he said, "Blessed be Adonai, God of my master Abraham, who has not abandoned his faithful love for my master, because Adonai has guided me to the house of my master's kinsman." The girl ran off and told her mother's household what had happened. Rivkah had a brother named Lavan. When he saw the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrists besides, and when he heard his sister Rivkah's report of what the man had said to her, he ran out to the spring and found the man standing there by the camels. "Come on in," he said, "you whom Adonai has blessed. Why are you standing outside when I have made room in the house and prepared a place for the camels?" So the man went inside, and while the camels were being unloaded and provided straw and fodder, water was brought for him to wash his feet and the feet of the men with him. But when a meal was set before him, he said, "I won't eat until I say what I have to say." Lavan said, "Speak." He said, "I am Abraham's servant. Adonai has greatly blessed my master, so that he has grown wealthy. He has given him flocks and herds, silver and gold, male and female slaves, camels and donkeys. Sarah, my master's wife, bore my master a son when she was old, and he has given him everything he has. My master has made me swear, saying, 'You are not to choose a wife for my son from among the women of the Canaanite, among whom I am living. Rather, you are to go to my father's house, to my kinsman, to choose a wife for my son.' I said to my master, 'Suppose the woman isn't willing to follow me?' Abraham answered me, 'Adonai, in whose presence I live, I will send his angel with you to make your trip successful. And you are to pick a wife for my son from my kinsman in my father's house. This will release you from my obligation under my oath. But if, when you come to my kinsman and they refuse to give her to you, this too will release you from my oath.' So today I came to the spring and said, 'Adonai, God of my master Abraham, if you are causing my trip to succeed in its purpose, then here I am, standing by the spring. I will say to one of the girls coming out to draw water, "Let me have a sip of your water from your jug." If she answers, "Yes, drink, and I will water your camels as well," then let her be the woman you intend for my master's son. And even if before I had finished speaking to my heart, there came Rivkah, going out with her jug on her shoulder. She went down to the spring and drew water. When I said to her, "Please let me have a drink," she immediately lowered the jug from her shoulder and said, "Drink, and I will water your camels as well." So I drank, and she had the camels drink too. I asked her, "Whose daughter are you?" And she answered, "The daughter of Betuel, son of Nahor, whom Milcah bore to him." Then I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrists, bowed my head, prostrated myself before Adonai, and blessed Adonai, God of my master Abraham, for having led me in the right way to obtain my master's brother's daughter for his son. So now, if you people intend to show grace and truth to my master, tell me. But if not, tell me, so that I can turn elsewhere." Lavan and Betuel replied, "Since this comes from Adonai, we can't say anything to you, either bad or good. Rivkah is here in front of you. Take her and go. Let her be your master's son's wife, as Adonai had said." When Abraham's servant heard what they had said, he prostrated himself on the ground to Adonai. Then the servant brought out silver and gold jewelry, together with clothing, and gave them to Rivkah. He also gave valuable gifts to her brother and mother. He and his men then ate and drank and stayed the night. In the morning they got up, and he said, "Send me off to my master." Her brother and mother said, Let the girl stay with us a few days, at least 10. After that, she will go. He answered them, don't delay me. Since Adonai has made my trip successful, please let me go back to my master. They said, we will call the girl and see what she says. They called Rivkah and asked her, will you go with this man? And she replied, I will. So they sent their sister Rivkah away with her nurse, Abraham's servant, and his men. They blessed Rivkah with these words, our sister, may you be the mother of millions, and may your descendants possess the cities of those who hate them. Then Rivkah and her maids mounted the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rivkah and went on his way. May please have the blessings after the reading of the Torah.
Excuse me. If you would please turn back to page 66 in your Siddur. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'kayei olam natan b'tokenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Amen. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has given us a Torah of truth and has planted eternal life in our midst. Blessed are you, O Lord, giver of the Torah.
You may be seated.
Today's Haftarah reading can be found in Malachim Aleph, 1 Kings, chapter 1 through verse 1 through 31. May I please have the blessings before reading the Haftarah.
And if you would please turn to page 70 in your Siddur. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bakar b'nvi'im tovim, v'ratza b'divreihem hanehemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai, haboker b'torah u'Moshe evdo u'V'Israel amo u'V'Invi'eh hamet v'zedek. Amen. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who selected good prophets and was pleased with their words which were spoken truthfully. Blessed are you, O Lord, who chooses the Torah, your servant Moshe, your people Israel, and prophets of truth and righteousness.
King David grew old. The years took their toll, and he couldn't get warm even when they covered him with bedclothes. His servants said to him, let us try to find a young virgin for my lord the king. She can wait on the king and be a companion for him, and she can lie next to you so that my lord the king will get some heat. After looking through all of Israel's territory for a beautiful girl, they found Avishag, the Shunammite, and brought her to the king. The girl was very beautiful and became a companion for the king. She took care of him, but the king did not have sexual relations with her. Adoniah, the son of Haggit, was beginning to claim that he would be king. To this end, he organized chariots and horsemen with 50 men to run ahead of him. His father had never in his life confronted him by asking, why are you behaving this way? Moreover, he was a very handsome man. He was born next after Avshalom. He conferred with Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and Abiathar, the Kohen, and they both supported Adoniah. But Zadok, the Kohen, Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and Natan, the prophet, Shimri, Rei, and David's elite guard were not on Adoniah's side. One day, Adoniah killed sheep, oxen, and fattened calves at the stone of Zachlet by the Ein Rogel. He summoned all his brothers, the king's sons, and all the men of Yehuda, the king's servants. But he did not summon Natan the prophet, Banyah the elite guard, or Shlomo his brother. Natan went to Bathsheba, the mother of Shlomo, and said, "Haven't you heard that Adoniah, the son of Haggith, has become king without the knowledge of David our Lord? Now, come, please, let me give you advice, so that you can save both your own life and that of your son Shlomo. Go, get in to see King David, and say to him, 'My lord, king, didn't you swear to your servant, your son Shlomo will be king after me? He will sit on my throne. So why is Adoniah king?' Right then, while you are still talking with the king, I will also come in after you and confirm what you are saying." Bathsheba went in to the king in his room. The king was very old. Avishak the Shunammite was in attendance on the king. Bathsheba bowed, prostrating herself to the king. The king asked, "What do you want?" She answered him, "My lord, you swore by Adonai your God to your servant, 'Your son Shlomo will be king after me. He will sit on my throne.' But now, here is Adoniah ruling as king, and you, my lord, the king, don't know anything about it. He has killed oxen, fattened calves, and sheep in great numbers, and he has summoned all the sons of the king, Abiathar the Cohen, and Joab the commander of the army. But he didn't summon Shlomo, your servant. As for you, my lord the king, all Israel is watching you. They are waiting for you to tell them who is to sit on the throne of my lord the king after him. If you don't, then, when my lord the king sleeps with his ancestors, I and my son Shlomo will be considered criminals." Right then, while she was still talking with the king, Natan the prophet entered. They told the king, "Natan the prophet is here." After coming into the king's presence, he prostrated himself before the king with his face to the ground. Natan said, "My lord, king, did you say Adoniah is to be king after me? He will sit on my throne? For he has gone down today and killed oxen, fattened calves, and sheep in great numbers. And he has summoned all the king's sons, the commanders of the army, and Abiathar the Cohen. Right now they are eating and drinking in his presence and proclaiming, 'Long live King Adoniah.' But he didn't summon me, your servant, or Zadok the Cohen, or Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, or your servant Shlomo. Is this authorized by my lord the king, without your having told your servant who would sit on the throne of my lord the king after him?" King David answered by saying, "Summon Bathsheba to me." She entered the king's presence and stood before the king. Then the king swore an oath, "As Adonai lives, who has delivered me from all adversity, as I swore to you by Adonai, the God of Israel, your son Shlomo will be king after me. He will sit on my throne in my place. So will I do today." Bathsheba bowed with her face to the ground, prostrating herself to the king, and said, "Let my lord King David live forever." May I please have the blessings after reading the Haftarah?
If you would please turn back to page 70 in the Siddur. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, zor kol holamim, zadik b'kol hadarot, ha'el haneman, ha'omer ve'osei, hamadaber kayim, she'kol devarav, emet v'zedek, ne'aman, atahu Adonai Eloheinu, v'ne'amanim devarecha, v'divoy kadmi varecha, akor lo yashuv rekam, ke'el melech ne'aman, v'rakaman atah, Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el haneman, v'kol devarav, Amen. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, Rock of all eternities, faithful in all generations, the trustworthy God who says and does, who speaks and makes it come to pass, all of whose words are true and righteous. Faithful are you, O Lord our God, and faithful are your words, for not one word of yours is turned back unfulfilled. For you are a faithful and compassionate God and King. Blessed are you, O Lord.
the God who is faithful in all his words.
Today's reading of the Brit Chadashah can be found in Matthew 8:19 through 22, and a second reading in 27:3 through 10. May I please have the blessings before the reading of the Brit Chadashah?
And if you would please turn to page 72 in your Siddur. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Mashiach Yeshua, v'habdi brot shel habrit HaKadashah. Baruch atah Adonai, notein habrit HaKadashah. Amen. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has given us Messiah Yeshua and the commandments of the new covenant. Blessed are you, O Lord, giver of the new covenant.
A Torah teacher approached and said to him, Rabbi, I will follow you wherever you go. Yeshua said to him, the foxes have holes, and the birds flying above have nests, but the Son of Man has no home of his own. Another of the Talmudim said to him, Sir, first let me go bury my father. But Yeshua replied, Follow me, and let the dead bury their own dead. When Yehuda, who had betrayed him, saw that Yeshua had been condemned, he was seized with remorse and returned the 30 silver coins to the head Kohanim and elders, saying, I sinned in betraying an innocent man to death. What is that to us? They answered. That's your problem. Hurling the pieces of silver into the sanctuary, he left. Then he went off and hanged himself. The head Kohanim took the silver coins and said, It is prohibited to put this into the temple treasury because it is blood money. So they decided to use it to buy the potter's field as a cemetery for foreigners. This is how it came to be called the Field of Blood, a name that it still bears. Then what Zechariah the prophet spoke was fulfilled, and they took the 30 silver coins, which was the price of the people of Israel had agreed to pay for him, and they used them to buy the potter's field, just as the Lord directed me. May I please have the blessings after the reading of the Brit Chadashah?
And if you would please once again turn back to page 72 in your Siddurim. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu hadavar hahamet, v'kayeh olam nata b'tokeinu. Baruch atah Adonai, notein habrit HaKadashah. Amen. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has given us the word of truth and has planted life everlasting in our midst. Blessed are you, O Lord, giver of the new covenant. Amen.
Well, once again, Shabbat Shalom. Good afternoon to you. Glasses. So today, as you can see in your bulletin, the name of the message is called The Graciousness of Avraham Passes On. Or you could say the kindness of Avraham. We spoke a lot about this in this morning's Torah study. And no, I'm not going to make Nagid get up here with me. So last week, in our Torah portion, one of the last things we read about, of course, was the Akedah, right? Or the binding of Isaac. This, of course, is where Avraham is tested by being told to sacrifice Yitzhak, or Isaac. And we all know God provides a ram as a substitute at the very last minute. And although this message is not really focused on all the intricacies of the Akedah, I would like to point out that after Isaac's quote-unquote almost sacrifice, he is not heard of again until he meets Rivka, or otherwise known as Rebekah. It's almost as if he is hidden away after his sacrifice, or his almost sacrifice, until he is introduced or revealed to his bride. Sounds like a foreshadow of Messiah, right? Anyhow, it's a little tidbit from last week's Torah. So back to our Torah portion of this week, Chaye Sarah, or the life of Sarah. And what I'd like to do is sort of walk through this portion with you and point out, again, some deeper understandings of the text. And we're going to try to focus, as the message title says, we're trying to focus on the graciousness of Abraham, or the kindness of Abraham, both in his speech and in his actions. And especially how those around him learn this graciousness from him, and specifically his servant Eliezer. If we were to take a look at this, starting with Genesis 23, we see that Sarah, Abraham's wife, she dies at the age of 127. Just a neat fact is she's the only woman in Scripture whose age is given. So Sarah dies after the Akedah, or the binding of Isaac. And some sages say it is because Sarah knew Abraham would be obedient to God, and that he would actually sacrifice Isaac if that's what God had told him to do. And that she therefore died from the grief of losing her only son. Of course, we know that's not what happened. And other rabbis say, well, it was just her time. And that's probably the case. But so anyhow, because of Sarah's death, we all know Abraham needs a place to bury her. And in Genesis 23:3, we read that Abraham approaches the sons of Het. The sons of Het are the Hittites, okay? We've all heard of all these ites as we read Scripture. Well, the sons of Het are the Hittites. So Abraham approaches the sons of Het, and he humbly and he graciously belittles himself in their sight, really, by beginning, and when he speaks to them, I am a foreigner living as an alien with you. As I said, the Hittites are the sons of Het. And if you want to know who Het is the son of Canaan, who is the son of Ham, or Ham, who is the son of Noach. And so Het is actually the great-grandson of Noach. And this can be found in Genesis 10:15 if you'd like to look up that. And so, as I said earlier, he is also the first, or the founder of the Hittites. So now that we know who Het is, second we want to notice how Abraham describes himself as a foreigner and an alien. And really he is thus far. Even though all the land is promised by God to him and his descendants, as of yet really none of it is his. And so as a foreigner and an alien, he doesn't really even have the right to own land. So he asks for a place to bury his dead, bury Sarah. And the sons of Het, of course, in turn, they reply that Abraham is like a prince of God to them. And they also say that they would gladly give Abraham any of their tombs. And this really shows the right standing and the good reputation that Abraham had with the people of the land, even as a foreigner and an alien. Let's read verses 7 through 9 of chapter 23. Let's turn to Genesis 23. Bereshit. And we're going to read verses 7 through 9. So chapter 23 of Genesis, verse 7. So Abraham got up, bowed before the people of the land, the sons of Chet, and spoke over them. If it is your desire to help me bury my dead, then listen to me. Ask Ephron, the son of Zohar, to give me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns, the one at the end of his field. He should sell it to me in your presence at its full value. Then I will have a burial site of my own. So one of the first things we need to ask is, who is this Ephron? Abraham asks for his caves explicitly. There's no real genealogy given about him, except that we know that he is the son of Zohar. And Zohar in the Hebrew means brightness, as in a dazzling, bright, white light. Okay? So this really gives the connotation that possibly Zohar was a righteous man. Okay? But Ephron means to be gray or dusty colored. And this may be one clue into the true nature of Ephron's character, which we'll see as we go on, that maybe he's not quite as brilliant white as Zohar, his father. And second, notice how, even though Abraham is speaking humbly while bowing, he is direct and he is detailed about his request. Okay, he says, speak to Ephron. I want the cave at the end of his field. You know, there's no beating around the bush here. There's no question about what Abraham is asking for. Now Ephron, he's there in the crowd, and he heard Abraham speaking. And so then we know, if we were to read verse 11, that he spoke up and he replies to Abraham, "No, my Lord, listen to me. I'm giving you the field with its cave. I'm giving it to you. In the presence of my people, I give it to you." Well, this sounds pretty good, doesn't it? That Ephron is willing to give this, not only the cave that Abraham asked for initially, but also the field that the cave is in. But we all know that from Genesis 14, with Abraham's dealings with the kings and the king of Sodom, explicitly that Abraham does not take anything without paying for it. Okay? So, as no one could say, I've made Abraham rich, right? So in verse 13 of chapter 23, Abraham now uses Ephron's own words to now include the field that the cave is in. And he also reiterates that he, Abraham, will pay for it. So now Ephron, seemingly breaking down to Abraham's request, he throws out a monetary value, an amount that appears to be a diminished price, just the way he throws it out there. And saying, you know, what is that kind of money between us, right? But in actuality, it is an outrageous price. And this is really inferred from 1 Kings 16:24. We're not going to turn there, but you can turn there on your own. And this is where Omri, he purchases an entire mountain in Samaria for 6,000 shekels. And they also compare it to a field that Jeremiah bought in Jeremiah 32:9 for 17 shekels. So 400 shekels for a field is really not so good of a deal. But Abraham, being the gracious man that he is, accepts and pays the outlandish price. It's interesting to note that all throughout Scripture, Ephron's name is spelled, I'm going to spell out the Hebrew for you. It's spelled Ayin, Fe, Resh, Vav, final noon. But in verse 16 of chapter 23, where the actual transaction takes place between Abraham and Ephron, Ephron's name is spelled without the Vav. And this implies that because he went through with this deal, that his stature was diminished in the sight of God and even in the sight of his kinsmen. For obviously, they also knew that the price was inflated. Some of the sages say, though, that Abraham would have paid almost any price he could afford. For even this great man of faith, after the Akedah, after the almost sacrifice of his son, and then the death of his wife Sarah, that he was still human. And he needed some token of physical evidence that this promised land would be his descendants, and that this small piece of Machpelah he could now call his own. And so that's why they say that he probably would have paid almost any price that he could have afforded, just to give him something besides just his faith. Okay? Interesting note. Though in our text that this is the present and most recent example of Abraham's graciousness, it is certainly not the only example. What about when Abraham leaves his home in Haran? He decides to take his nephew Lot, which for those Hebrew scholars is actually pronounced Lot, okay? So he takes Lot. He did not have to do this. So why did he? But being gracious, and probably because Lot's father was Abraham's brother, right? Haran. Haran was dead at this point, and Abraham decides to take Lot under his wing, basically. So he shows his graciousness there to really take on that burden of taking Lot with him. Later on, Abraham's graciousness shines bright again. This time giving Lot the choice of what part of the land he would like to settle in. If you remember this, they both had many herds and herdsmen, they were quarreling, and so Abraham's like, okay, here's the land before you, you take your choice, and I'll take the other part. That showed a lot of graciousness. After this is the battle of the kings. And again, we all know that Lot, he gets captured. And Abraham is told about this. And so he immediately gathers his men, or maybe one man, as we talked about in Torah study, and he pursues after Lot. And we are told that he catches up with the people who captured Lot and catches up with Lot at Hovah. And Hovah is not just a random name of some random place told to us, okay? A lot of times we read right over these things. And Hovah in the Hebrew means debt. D-E-B-T, debt. Okay? So this really infers to us that basically Abraham took on a debt that he truly had no obligation to take on. For as I said earlier, Lot had already separated himself from Abraham. Abraham had given him the land, said, here, take what you choose, and I'll go the other way. So they were kind of living separate at this point. But when Abraham hears about it, in his graciousness, Abraham decides to rescue Lot. And the sages say he took on this debt for himself, right? A debt that he didn't have to take on. For Lot himself could not pay this debt. Lot could not rescue himself. So Abraham did it. Sounds a lot like Yeshua. Another example of Abraham's graciousness is when the three, quote unquote, the three men or the angels visit him at his tent. And Abraham, he runs and he hurries. We read that in the text. He runs and he hurries to make sure that the food is prepared for his guests. And then he stands over them like a servant, ready to be at their beck and call. Then after that, we have the famous bargaining, I'll call it, between God and Abraham over Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham, in his graciousness, he tries to save as many innocent people as he can from the destruction, starting out with a high number and finally conceding to 10. And he probably, once again, had his nephew Lot in mind. Returning to our Torah portion, we come to chapter 24. And as Dan read, Abraham feels that the time has come for Isaac to have a wife. And verse 1 of chapter 24 ends by saying, and Adonai had blessed Abraham in everything. And we discussed this in our Torah study this morning. But this phrase, in everything, Bakol, again, has the gematria of 52. And for those of you who weren't here, the gematria is the study of the numerical value of Hebrew words and how words of the same value relate to one another. And as I said, Bakol was 52, and when it says that Adonai had blessed him in everything, Bakol, 52, Ben, the Hebrew word for son, is also 52. And so we see that God has fulfilled his promise to Abraham about a son, and so Abraham feels that he had truly been blessed in everything. Now Abraham decides to send his head servant to find a wife for Isaac. Again, we talked about this in the Torah study. We're never told the servant's name throughout any of the narrative, but it is assumed from chapter 15, verse 2 of Genesis, that his head servant is Eliezer. We can turn there again. Let's turn there just to reiterate that ourselves. Genesis 15, verse 2. Avram replied, at this time Abraham's name is still Avram. Avram replied, Adonai God, what good will your gifts be to me if I continue childless, and Eliezer from Damascus inherits my possessions? Okay. So we see here that at this point, Abraham believes that the person closest to him, since he has no son at this time, that the person closest to him would inherit his possessions. And in this case, it would be his servant, Eliezer. It's also your Hebrew word of the day. If you look in your bulletin, see there Eliezer, which means God of my help, or God is help. In verse 2 of chapter 24, back in Genesis 24, in verse 2, Abraham has his servant take an oath by placing his hand under Abraham's thigh. Now, under the thigh in the Hebrew really means under the male organ, or under the private parts, however you'd like to call it. And you might ask why. It's an awful uncomfortable place to place your hand. Your own hand, let alone somebody else's hand. But anyhow. But why? He says, well, the sages say, number one, it could have implied a curse of sterility, or of being sterile, upon the taker of the oath if he did not fulfill that oath. And of course, we know the oath that he was taking was to choose a wife for Isaac, not to choose a wife for Isaac from the Canaanites, but to go to Abraham's home. One of the other reasons that the sages say that they did this, how they would place the hand under the thigh, we'll say, that Abraham himself felt that since God had made a covenant with him through circumcision, then that this oath of such importance to him should be sworn upon this sacred sign, okay, the sacred sign of circumcision. So that's why Abraham asks him to place his hand on such a sacred part. Verse 4 tells us, let's read verse 4 of Genesis 24. Let's start with 3. Because I want you to swear by Adonai, God of heaven and God of the earth, that you will not choose a wife for my son from among the women of the Canaanite, among whom I am living. Verse 4, but that you will go to my homeland, to my kinsmen, to choose a wife for my son Yitzchak. So why would Abraham ask Eliezer to go back to Haran for a wife for Isaac. Do you not think that they also probably were idol worshippers? Yeah, just like the Canaanites where he was living anyhow. But the sages, of course, they have an answer for this. And they say that, yes, they were idol worshippers, but the Canaanites were much worse idol worshippers. They were more morally corrupt and unjust in their dealings than even those that lived in Haran. And so Eliezer, he leaves on his journey and he arrives in Haran at a well. Let's read that. Verses 12 through 14. I know we read it this morning, but chapter 24 of Genesis, verse 12. And he said, this is Eliezer speaking, really he's praying, Adonai, God of my master Abraham, please let me succeed today and show your grace to my master Abraham. Here I am, standing by the spring, as the daughters of the townsfolk come out to draw water. Verse 14, I will say to one of the girls, please lower your jug so that I can drink. If she answers, yes, drink, and I will water your camels as well. Then let her be the one you intend for your servant Yitzchak. This is how I will know that you have shown grace to my master. So we see here that in verse 12, he prays to God for success of his mission. And in verses 13 and 14, he asks for God to make it clear to him that he has understanding that God is granting that success. So basically, even though we're not supposed to do this, Eliezer's pretty much asking for a sign. It's also interesting to point out that this is the first time in Scripture that a prayer for divine guidance is shown to us, and it comes from a nameless person, and not even, and really an Israelite at that time, or a Hebrew at that time. Verse 15, we read that Eliezer hadn't even finished praying when Rivkah arrived. And she went to the well, and she returned. So Eliezer asks in verse 17 for a little water. In the Hebrew it says, me'at ma'im. It literally means a little water. Okay, he asks for a sip, right? I think it says. But it means a little water. It's interesting. Eliezer had learned this. He learned well from Abraham, right? His gracious master. And Eliezer passed this on by trying to diminish the amount of water needed. What I mean by this is exactly what Abraham said to the visitors in his tent in Genesis 18:4. When he said to them, let a little water be brought and wash your feet. He said, let me'at ma'im be brought. Eliezer uses the same phrase. And Rivkah, in turn, showed her compassion and hospitality by offering also to water the camels. And Rivkah also showed her relation and her similarity to Abraham, as we are told in verse 20. If we were to read it, we can turn there. Verse 20 of chapter 24 says, she quickly emptied her jug into the trough, then ran again to the well to draw water, and kept on drawing water for all his camels. This is exactly what Abraham did when he had the guests at his tent. We're told there he hurried and he ran for the bread and the meat and all this in Genesis 18. Now normally, courtesy would require Eliezer to decline Rivkah's offer to water all the camels by herself without offering to help, because obviously Eliezer had other men with him that could have done the job. But Eliezer was testing. He was testing to see the confirmation of his prayer and testing also Rivkah's true personality to see if she would not only offer, as we spoke of earlier in Torah study, but also fulfill her offer. And by the way, camels, after a long journey, Marnie had mentioned this in Torah study, they would drink, some say 10, some say 14, some say 20. However you look at it, it's a lot of water, okay? And so Eliezer had 10 camels with him, so if we say they did drink 14, that's 140 gallons of water. And just for a visual, that's 28 5-gallon buckets, okay? 28 of these. Now, I grew up on a farm, and I worked on a farm all through high school, and if this was full, you wanted 2 of them, so you could have one in each hand to balance you out. It was hard to carry just one. And I'm not sure what they used back then. It says she had a jug, and I can't imagine it even being 5 gallons because she had it up on her shoulder. But I don't know. Maybe. It would have been heavy. Even the jug probably was heavy because it was probably made of clay. So anyhow, that was just a visual there. 28 of those. I'd have probably stopped after 4 or 5. Said, hey, get those men over here. And take notice, after Rivka waters the camels, Eliezer is so confident that God had answered his prayer in Rivka that he bestows upon her a gold nose ring and 2 gold bracelets, as we discussed earlier, before he ever asks her who she is and whose family she is. Now, there's some different opinions on that, as we had in our Torah study, but this is what we're going with. And it's also interesting that we are specifically told the weight of the gold nose ring. In our complete Jewish Bible, it says 1/5 of an ounce. In the Hebrew, it is a beka. Okay, a beka. And a beka is actually a half shekel. Okay, so this nose ring had the weight of a half shekel. And if you recall what a half shekel is, this would prophetically symbolize the amount that every Jew would contribute yearly for the sanctuary, right? Everyone, rich, poor, was required to give a half shekel. Also says 2 gold bracelets, which, as Nagid pointed out earlier, this prophetically symbolizes the 2 stone tablets, okay, that Moshe had brought down from Mount Sinai. And we're given their weight also. What's it say in here? I forget what they weighed in the complete Jewish Bible. In the Hebrew, 4 ounces it says in the complete Jewish Bible. 4 ounces. But in the Hebrew, it actually gives us a weight of that too. And it says their weight was 10 shekels. So not only was it 2 gold bracelets, they weighed 10 shekels, symbolizing the 10 commandments that were written on those 2 tablets, two stone tablets. So he gives Rivka these gifts, and Eliezer, he shows the confidence after that by saying, and he asks Rivka, whose daughter are you? But before she can even reply, he continues, is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? So why would he say this even before she gets a chance to answer who she is? Well, the sages, of course, they speak about this, and they say that the reason he did not even wait for an answer of who she was is because, number one, he was convinced that this was the girl that God had led him to for Isaac. Or number two, he just wanted to meet the family of such a kind, generous girl, whether she was the chosen one or not. He just decided that's where he wanted to stay the night. Continuing on in chapter 24, in verse 28, we are introduced to Laban. In the Hebrew, it's pronounced Lavan. Lavan means white. And again, this would almost give you the idea that Lavan is possibly a righteous man. But it's almost a joke in the Hebrew. Okay, that's why it's put that way, because Lavan was not really a righteous man. And we understand that as we read on through the Torah. And we're really given this idea, even here in our Torah portion, what kind of man he might have been, because he ran to Eliezer after first seeing the gold ring and bracelets, and then hearing Rivka's words of who this man was. So we see here that Laban or Lavan, he was maybe a little greedy or wealth motivated. And it really sounds also a little like Ephron, which we just talked about, whom Abraham just dealt with in the purchase of Machpelah. I'm sure Eliezer was witness to the transaction between Ephron and Abraham, or he was at least told about it by Abraham, and so he had an idea what was going on here. Starting in verse 34, we see that Eliezer recapitulates or reviews his experience. So Eliezer retells his story, except for the sake of graciousness, or courtesy maybe you could say, he changes or he leaves out a few details. Number one, he explains who he is. He's a servant. Number two, he explains who his master is. His master is Abraham. He explains what his master possesses: flocks, cattle, silver, gold, servants, camels, and donkeys. He explains who his master's wife is, in Sarah. And that his master has a son who has received everything Abraham possesses. And he explains what Abraham said to him, how Eliezer is not to take a wife for his son from the Canaanites, but that he is to go to Abraham's father's house, to Abraham's family, to find a wife for his son. And he also explains how he questions Abraham about the possibility of failure of his mission in verse 39. Let's read that. Verse 39 of Genesis 24. So this is Eliezer retelling his story. And so I said to my master, suppose the woman isn't willing to follow me. So there's a simple thing there we skip over in this word suppose. When suppose is spelled the normal way of Aleph, Lamed, Vav, and Yod, like he did when he was first speaking to Abraham. But this time it's spelled without the Vav. Okay, it's Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Yod. This time it's Aleph, Lamed, Yod. And what this really spells out to me, and we hit on this in the Torah study a little bit. We didn't really delve into it too much. But I believe it was Yafa that said this, that Eliezer was truly hoping that Rivka would say no. And that way, Isaac would marry one of Eliezer's daughters, meaning that Isaac would come to Eliezer, to me. Verse 41. Genesis 24, verse 41. This will release you from your obligation under my oath, but if when you come to my kinsmen they refuse to give her to you, this too will release you from my oath. So we're looking at the word oath. When Eliezer gives his retelling of the story, the word used there for oath is in the Hebrew Allah, not the Muslim God, but Allah. And it really means an imprecation, or an oath that is reinforced by a curse. And he used that instead of the normal word for an oath that Abraham used when he first asked Eliezer, which is sheva. We're pretty familiar with that word. Sheva meaning an oath. And they say the reason that Eliezer used this word is he was trying to impress upon Rivka's family the seriousness of Abraham's request. We also read that Eliezer, in his retelling, he graciously did not repeat Abraham's command not to take Isaac back to the land of Haran. And he did this so he did not offend the family, because that would put forth some kind of negative connotation. Also earlier in verse 14, in Eliezer's prayer to God, he uses a typical word for maiden when he's praying. And this is the Hebrew word na'ar. But once again, in his repeated story to Rivka's family, in verse 43, he uses the word alma instead of maiden, instead of na'ar. He uses alma, which means a young, vigorous woman. Okay? It's almost like he's showing compliment to her, okay? Building Rivka up. Let's read verse 47. 47 of Genesis 24. This is Eliezer still talking. I asked her, whose daughter are you? And she answered, the daughter of Bethuel, son of Nachor, whom Milcah bore to him. Then I put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrists. Now, we talked a lot about this also in the Torah study. Here he says he questioned Rivka who she was before giving her the jewelry, when it's actually the other way around if we look at it in the original reading. So they ask, even the sages ask, why did he do this? Why did he change it? And it all comes down to graciousness again. This graciousness that he learned from Abraham. And they say it was so that he did not give the impression that he was presumptuous in his mission, or that he was irresponsible with Abraham's belongings by giving it away before he even knew who Rivka was. Even though possibly Eliezer did know in his spirit that God had just made his plan successful. But he wasn't really sure how like the unbelieving family of Rivka would comprehend that. So he kind of dresses it up a bit and changes things around. In verse 49, let's read that. Verse 49 of Genesis 24. So now if you people intend to show grace and truth to my master, tell me. But if not, tell me so that I can turn elsewhere. We talked about this a bit in the Torah study also. Why does he ask for grace and truth? Sages, they have an explanation for this. They say grace alone, or grace by itself, denotes only intention. But the truth, coupled with that grace, brings fulfillment of the intention. So, in her grace, she said she would do something, but with the truth, it brought fulfillment of that intention. And he's asking for the same thing from Lavan and from Rivka's family, because he saw this. He saw this in Rivka, and so he's asking for the same thing from our family. In verse 50, let's read that. It says, Lavan, Bethuel replied, since this comes from Adonai, we can't say anything to you either bad or good. Verse 51. Rivka is here in front of you. Take her and go. Let her be your master's son's wife, as Adonai has said. So basically, he asked them whether they're going to be graceful and truthful to him and give him an answer, and they give him an answer. Basically, the answer, yes. But it says they couldn't say anything either good or bad. It's kind of strange wording. But I thought about it a little bit, and I guess I understand. On the one hand, I would be happy to marry my daughter off to such a prosperous, blessed man. But on the other hand, it all did happen quite quickly. So maybe that's why they couldn't say anything good or bad. I'm not sure. So verse 53, we're not going to read it, but Eliezer gives silver, gold, clothing to Rivka. And it says he gives valuable gifts to Laban and Milcah. Some translations, they translate this valuable gifts as fruit. So possibly Eliezer only gave fruit to Laban and Milcah. And in verse 54, finally, after Eliezer's retelling of his story, they eat and they drink and they stay the night. And in the morning, Eliezer is eager to return to his master Abraham. But in verse 55, we read that Laban and Milcah tried to have Rivka stay for 10 days before leaving. It's possible that they're kind of having second thoughts about their decision. It's also possible that Laban, that he introduced this idea ostensibly, or after receiving, if we went with the one translation, after receiving only fruit, or possibly gifts that were not as valuable as what he thought he should receive, after he saw the gifts that Rivka were given, that he introduced this idea of Rivka staying a few days, like 10 days. And so in verse 58, they ask Rivka for her decision, possibly thinking and hoping that just like them, maybe she was having second thoughts, and that she wouldn't want to leave the comfortable surroundings of her home and her family so suddenly. But we know her answer. She says, I will go. In verse 62, it says, Isaac came from having gone to Be'er Lachai-roi. Be'er Lachai-roi means well of the living one appearing to me. This came from Hagar. She's the one that named that well. As we discussed earlier in the Torah study, Isaac possibly had went there to find Hagar, okay, to bring back Hagar to be a wife to Abraham and kind of be a consolation to him now that Sarah was gone, now that Sarah had died. And this could be the case. As in chapter 25 of Genesis, we read that Abraham did take on a new wife, and we are told her name is Keturah. And tradition says that this Keturah is Hagar, and that she was given this name for two reasons. Number one, her deeds, the things she did, were as beautiful as the scent of incense, because incense in the Hebrew is ketores, and her name was Keturah. This is one possibility. Or, number two, she had remained chaste or undefiled by another man from the time that she was separated from Abraham. And this is understood because Keturah in Aramaic means restrained. So I hope that as we discuss these things, you're able to receive some new insights into the text, the deeper meanings of the text. and to especially for us all to focus on the graciousness of the speech and of the actions of Abraham in his dealings with God and with man, not only in our portion here that we read, but also in his dealings with Lot, in his dealings with the visitors at his tent, and in his dealings with God and his hope for the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. And to see here how this graciousness really rubbed off on Eliezer, on those, not only Eliezer, but others that were in this sphere of influence. And also to see how we, again, can learn from Avraham Avinu, our father Avraham, to be gracious, to be humble, but yet be straightforward with God and with our fellow man. And how we also can learn from Eliezer, sometimes leaving out certain details to avoid offense, or changing our words a little bit to be more gentle in our address to people. This, of course, does not mean that we are to be deceptive or untruthful in any way, but we just need to pray for and to use discernment in order that we may edify those around us and also glorify God. Amen.
Akazinkim ba veito ke Eushar Terakeha Darkeino Vekol Nativoteha Shalom Ashivenu Adonai Eleka Vena Shuva Kadesh Kadesh Yameinu Kadesh Yameinu Kekedem. It is a tree of life to those who take hold of it, and those who support it are praiseworthy. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Bring us back, Lord, to you, and we shall come, renew our days as of old.
And as we begin to close out our service, if you would turn to page 92 for the Haruach Vehakala, the Spirit and the Bride. I'll cantor this in the Hebrew, and then we'll repeat it together in the English. Haruach Vehakala Hurimbo Ashomea Yomarna Bo Atsamea Vona Hechafez Ki Hakna Maim Chayim Chinam. Together, the Spirit and the bride say, "Come," and let him who hears say, "Come." Whoever is thirsty, let him come, and whoever wishes, let him take the free gift of the water of life. And then continuing on that page with the Nizgav Adonai, the Lord is exalted. I'll cantor this in the Hebrew, and then again we'll repeat it in the English. Nizgav Adonai ki shokein marom mileti om mishpachus dacha. Nizgav Adonai ki shokein marom mileti om mishpachus dacha. Adonai shofteinu, Adonai mechocheinu, Adonai melachenu, hu yoshienu, hu yoshienu, hu yoshienu. Together. The Lord is exalted, for he dwells on high. He will fill Zion with justice and righteousness. For the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our king. It is he who will save us. And then our last prayer on page 96, the Susasis, I will greatly rejoice. I'll cantor this in the Hebrew, and then again we'll repeat it in the English. So sasis bahadonai, degel nafshi be'elohai, kihil bishani begde yesha, milhazadaka yahatahani, kihil bishana begde yesha, mihil zaka yahatahani. So sasis bahadonai, degel nafshi be'elohai, kihil bishani begda yesha mehezekaya tani. Gehil bishani begda yesha mehezekaya tani. Together, I will greatly rejoice in the Lord. My soul will be joyful in my God. For he has clothed me with garments of salvation and covered me with a robe of righteousness. You may be seated.
As we're winding down for the fall, and completed the High Holy Days. We're looking forward to Hanukkah. If you look in the back of your bulletin, you will see 2 red dots. That's hopefully to draw your attention to the change. Okay, we've had to change the date. We were originally, we're going to have it on the 18th, and the venue that wasn't able to handle it that day. So it's now Sunday the 11th, a week before, and it's going to be at the Goodwill Fire Hall on 2318 South Queen Street. Same time, from 2 to 5, but at a different location. It is a bigger hall, has a nicer kitchen, and as I have in here, it's right beside Handel's Ice Cream. So, can't get much better than that. We will be able to get in there at any time we decide to decorate and set up for games, so we really, really need people to volunteer to help us in those areas. So please, if you can help us, let us know, and as soon as I have a time and when we'll be over there, I'll let you know. Also, I know it seems far off, but January is right around the corner. Saturday, January the 7th, we will be hosting the How You Sew class. Barry has graciously agreed to teach that from 2:30 to 4:30. That's the one that First Fruits Design puts out. The cost of the book is $35. It is a 10-week class. And I'm telling you, it is a great class. It's great for learning your Hebrew roots and some of the Hebrew background behind a lot of the New Testament scriptures. It is open to people in the community, so if you want friends and family to come, that's fine, that's great. However, we would appreciate if you sign them up so we know how many books we have. If you don't have a book, it's $35 for the book. It's more than worth it. Let me just tell you, it's a wonderful series for How You Sewed means the foundation. The foundation. So keep that in mind and be thinking of people to bring. And I'm not saying just invite them, but bring them with you. Sit here and bring them so that they can feel comfortable. It's a wonderful teaching. And also, this coming Friday, the 25th, is the last Shabbat of the month. And are we doing the Rev Shabbat dinner? Okay, awesome. And is today the last day to sign up? Okay. So if you haven't signed up for the Rev Shabbat dinner, please do that so that we can have enough food for everybody. It's another way. If you want to learn how to bring in the Rev Shabbat and the Friday evenings, the prayers, some meanings behind them, all of it, it's a great time to do that. It's free. All you need to do is sign up. So please do that. But B'nai Torah is not this. Torah Club's not this week, right? Because Thanksgiving, so that's just been okay. All right, and let's see. Yeah, we'll get there. Just want to see if I had everything in the back. Okay, for corporate prayer, who's the prayer leaders? Oh, Marnie and Dan. Okay, so if you have a prayer need, please see Marnie and Dan after service. They'd be more than happy to help you with that and pray with you. Anything else? Sure. We're going to have sign-up sheets next week, hopefully for How You Sewed as well as for the games. We need people to help with the games too. And we want families to come. We want kids to come so that we can teach them about Hanukkah. They can have a great time, celebrate the feast, and in order to do that, we need help. And the games need to be managed. It isn't just a free-for-all. So again, it's a way you can help out, is help decorate, set up, tear down, and manage the game. So there will be sign-up sheets next week. Anything else? Okay. Please stand for the Aaronic benediction.
Yivareka Adonai v'hishmereh
Yair Adonai panav elecha v'kunecha. Yis Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May Adonai bless you and keep you. May Adonai make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May Adonai lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Shabbat shalom.